How's it going, everybody? Jody in here, and today I'm taking a little bit of a sidetrack, a little deviation from the regular, and I'm going to talk about a project I just did for what you see on the screen here. This is my Kawasaki Versys X300. It is, as the name suggests, a 300cc motorcycle. It is an adventure bike, which is good for both on-road and off-road, and I certainly do both. But anyways, if you notice in this picture, you'll see right below my helmet, there's a line that goes across the saddlebag. Now, the saddlebag is that box on the back there. There's actually one on both sides. There's one on either side. And they're they're a decent-sized saddlebag. They are, I don't know the exact amount, but I know that they can carry 2 gallons of water, two-gallon jugs of water. So, in each. So that's a thing. Anyway, so you'll notice the line going across it down from the helmet. And what that line is actually a bungee cord. And the reason it's got a bungee cord on it is because there was a little bit of a issue when I first got my bike. Now we're going to set the Wayback Machine here to 5 years ago. And when I first purchased this bike, I wasn't able to ride it right away because I didn't have insurance or anything like that. I had just gotten my M1 license, and we have a graduated system here in Ontario, Canada. And you start with an M1 license, which is a very, very basic learner's license. I honestly don't know what the purpose of the M1 is, because I have not myself really had the experience of being able to ride with an M1. Insurance companies won't insure you. Basically, that's the way it goes. Insurance companies won't insure you with an M1. So, in order to go from my M1 to my M2, I couldn't take a road test because, of course, I had no riding experience because I couldn't get insurance to ride under an M1. So I had to take a course, and I took a course through the local college, and it was a motorcycle safety course, which is basically like driver's ed for motorcycles. And once I was done that, I moved into my M2 license. And now, as soon as I had my M2 license, all of a sudden, and the safety course, all of a sudden the insurance companies were like, "Oh yeah, we can insure you." Even though I still had no on-road experience, I just had the basically weekend of safety training. So, with that said, I started riding. I started riding the motorcycle I had purchased probably like 6 months before then. Actually, it might have even been more, because I was paying for the motorcycle that was stored for many months before I was actually able to ride it, which was fine with me. It was fine with me. I needed a motorcycle because I wanted to get my motorcycle license. I needed a motorcycle, so it didn't really matter when I got the motorcycle. It didn't matter if I got it, when I got my M2. It didn't matter if I got it before then. It is what it is. I was actually happy to get it earlier because that means it was paid off earlier. So, moving right along in our story, about I want to say a month after I started actually riding the bike, I noticed some rattling coming from the saddlebag. I believe it started on the right side, the right side saddlebag. So as I was driving down the road, I'd hear clunk, 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 and I realized it was the lid flapping. And so when I went and examined it, I realized that I had a slight problem. There was no lock anymore. Yeah. So I didn't know where the lock went. It obviously fell out while I was riding. And so there's nothing really I could do about it. I got a bungee cord, wrapped it around it, and all was good again as far as, you know, the lid slapping. About a week after that happened, the other lock fell out. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I went and the way that the locks are designed. Actually, let's move on to the next few frames here to get into a little more of what's going on. Okay, so this here is the saddlebag removed from the bike, so you can kind of see the size of it. It is a decent size. Like I said, it's the inside is shaped kind of like a barbell, kind of like you see the top, how it's big on the ends and kind of a little narrower in the middle. And like I said, believe it or not, you could put a gallon jug of water on either end there and still have some room down the middle for something. They're fairly decent size saddlebags, and I like the hard plastic. It has a water seal on the lid, a rubber water seal, so they are actually watertight as far as like rainwater and stuff like that. Now, the way that the locking system works is on the lid. There's a hinge on the front side, which on this picture it would be the front side would be the left or the right side that you can't see, the right face that you can't see. That would be the front, and that would be where the hinge is. The back is where the lock is. That would be your far left side is the back side, and that's where the lock is. So you got a hinge on one side and a lock on the other. And on the lid, you have this here, which is basically it's basically a bar that's just there to be grabbed by the lock, by the latch. So pay attention to the two screws. You can see how it's attached with two screws because that'll be important later. I'm not referring to the two very visible screws that are in the black plastic. I'm referring to the two screws that are inserted upwards into the metal plate that looks like it's kind of a hook shape there. So, and then on the other end, on the box end, not the lid end, but the box end, you have this little latch right here. And that grabs onto those bars and holds onto it and keeps it closed. Now notice the two little screws in the bottom. The two little screws in the bottom there are screwed into the barrel lock. And it's kind of like a cabinet lock. It's just a cylinder that has a lock in it, and when you turn the key, it rotates that mechanism there. That I'll call it a catch plate, or a hook plate, whatever you want to call it. It rotates that 90 degrees. So right now, what you're seeing in the picture is when it's in its locked position. When it's in its unlocked position, that would be rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise on where those two screws are. Those two screws are where the barrel is. So the hook would swing down counterclockwise to the left when it unlocks. So that's the original setup. Now, when you get the saddlebag comes with instructions. I did not install the saddlebags. The dealership installed the saddlebags. It came with my bike. It was part of the deal that I had made when I purchased the bike. It was the saddlebags were to be included. So when I got when I noticed the locks falling out, I contacted the dealership, told them what happened, and they basically said, well, you know, Kawasaki has replacement locks. You can order them. I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. And they also said, well, check with Kawasaki because maybe Kawasaki has a warranty. I was like, all right, sounds like a plan. So I contacted Kawasaki. like Kawasaki Canada, basically the Canada department. And I said to them, I said, here's what happened. The locks fell out, so I don't have any locks anymore. And they're like, oh, well, basically, that's not our fault. That's the dealer's fault. They didn't assemble it right. And I mean, what do you mean they didn't assemble it right? And I said, well, if the locks fell out, they probably didn't use thread lock on the screws. And I was like, what do you mean didn't use thread lock on the screws? And they say, well, in the instructions, it says to use thread lock when you're putting in the screws, a generous amount of thread lock. And I believe it was blue that you were supposed to use. It was the blue thread lock. So I was like, okay, can you send me those directions? And they sent me the directions, or they actually sent me the installation manual for the saddlebags, which I didn't get from them. I didn't get from the dealership. I didn't get the manual for the saddlebags. And sure enough, right there it said, when you're putting that little hook on and putting those 2 little screws in, make sure you put plenty of blue Loctite when you put the screws in, because they will vibrate loose otherwise. I was like, huh. Now, the way that it's designed, you can actually see the way it's designed. The 2 screws and the hook are on the inside of the box. So when the screws fell out and the hook fell off, which let the lock, go out the back, the hook and the screws were left in the saddlebag. So I got the screws, and here they are. So as you can see on the screws, there's a little bit of a corrosion buildup on them, and that's from after the fact, because they were actually sitting in the saddlebag for years before this picture was taken. This picture was just taken like a day or 2 ago. Excuse me. This problem happened 5 years ago. But you can see clearly there is no blue or red or any other color of thread lock on those screws. Not a single drop. And that's why the locks fell out. So here's a picture of the end of the back end of the saddlebag where the lock is, and you can see it's just a gaping hole. There is an insert there, and the insert on the inside has a plastic nut, which I'll show you in a minute. But the barrel lock that was in it is, of course, no longer there. As soon as the plate fell off the back, as soon as the hook plate on the back fell off, that was the only thing that was holding that lock in, which is kind of a weird design to begin with. I think that's kind of a ridiculous design to begin with. But anyways, that's the way they designed it. And I did some pricing, and to replace those locks at the time when I looked, which I think was about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, to replace those locks, they were $85 a piece. US. American. $85 a piece for a barrel lock. Basic cabinet lock. $85. And I don't think you understand, but you will. And that was $85 a piece. So we're talking, if I wanted to replace both locks, which fell out, wasn't my fault they fell out. I even contacted the dealer and said, you guys didn't use thread lock, and they were like, oh, well, whatever. They didn't own up to it or anything. They just said, well, you can order a couple of new ones from Kawasaki. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So when I got that sticker shock of like $170 US to replace both locks, $170 US. I'm Canadian. That is a lot of Canadian money. And that doesn't include taxes. That doesn't include shipping. That doesn't include duty, if there's any duty on them, or any kind of duty fees, because bringing stuff across the border and whatnot, and it's expensive. It's an expensive something across the border. If it's a cheap something across the border, they don't really care. But the second you start getting into hundreds of dollars, they start to care. So when I was looking at, after taxes, shipping, and all that, when I was looking at about a $200 bill for these 2 little tiny locks, I was like, there's no way. There's got to be no. There's no. We're not doing this. So I went on Amazon, and this is a current Amazon listing for the same lock that I purchased. They're bundling it differently now. Now they're bundling them in. By the looks of it, they're bundling them in a set of 10. When I bought them, like 2.5 years ago or whatever, they were in a set of 2. So I was able to get a set of 2 instead of a set of 10. But even so, you can see right here from this clip that I got today. I took this off Amazon today, and when I took this off of Amazon, I actually went and referenced my old order. Like, I clicked my old order, and it brought me to this, which is the lock that I bought. Although, like I said, they're bundling them differently now. Their quantity is 10 now instead of 2. But even so, look at the price. $25.99 for 10 of them. $25.99. 10 of them. Two for my saddlebag cost me $200, or would have cost me $200. Here, $25.99 for 10 of the exact same kind of lock. The only difference is, and I'll get into this in a second, is that Kawasaki went and did some proprietary bullshit with their locks. That's the only reason they're more expensive, is because they didn't go with a standard lock, or a standard barrel lock like you're seeing on the screen right now. They went with their own weird screwed up system, or lock shape, that you can't even find a picture of their lock online. I've tried to find a picture of their lock. The picture that I showed you, that showed the hook inside the saddlebag, that was off a YouTube video that somebody else had been commenting about the locks on their saddlebag. I actually took that screenshot from that video because that is the only reference online that I could find that shows the lock mechanism of these saddlebags. That is how strangely non-specific and protected this, I guess, design is. There's no pictures. There's no pictures online. You cannot find a picture like the picture you're looking at right now, where it shows the hook, it shows the barrel lock, it shows the diameter, all the measurements and everything. You cannot find any pictures like that of the Kawasaki lock. Does not exist online. I have searched and searched and searched, and I've gone into the depths of internet hell to try to find it, and I cannot find it. So, with that said, I had to do something. If I couldn't copy their lock, I had to fashion my own, obviously. So, what I started out with was purchasing these 2 locks. I said, at the time, I think it was $5.99 for 2, which, I mean, still, that's not bad. $5.99 for 2, that's like $3 a piece. It still beats the hell out of $200, So I bought my 2 locks. I got them home. And the first thing I did was I inspected them, of course. Now, this is a recent picture, but this is basically how they came. Well, I shouldn't say this is how they came. It was the plate was screwed to the back of the barrel lock. But as you can see, these are the parts of the lock that I received. Minus a nut, which I think I have it in a later picture. There's a retaining nut that goes onto that. That's why you see the outside of the barrel lock is threaded. There's a retaining nut that goes on that. But anyway, so this is what I received. As you can see, the barrel lock is round. Deceptively, there are actually 2 somewhat flat sides to it, which you'll also see later. But it doesn't change the fact that the barrel lock is round. So, round lock going in a round hole, right? No problem. And then when I actually tried to do something, when I actually tried to put the barrel lock in the hole in the Kawasaki bike, or in the OEM, what do you call it? The OEM sleeve that they have there for their barrel lock. And you can see the problem right here. And this is where their proprietary bullshit comes into effect. Their sleeve for the saddlebag is proprietary. You can see the butterfly shape. There's kind of a butterfly shape. It's not a perfect circle. It's a butterfly shape. So there's a circle with two sections, which I guess are supposed to prevent rotation of the barrel. So it can't rotate. The barrel can't rotate in the sleeve. When you're locking it and unlocking it. So in other words, the lock has to turn. The whole sleeve can't turn. The lock has to turn, or I should say, the lock can't turn in the sleeve. The lock has to, unlock. Which is kind of, backwards, because if that plastic nut, which you see right there, if that is loose, the whole thing turns. So it doesn't make any sense to have the butterfly design, other than the fact that you have to have that specific Kawasaki lock to fit that specific hole. It's not a universal hole, which is what you get with the cabinet barrel lock. The cabinet barrel lock is a universal size. Not always the same length, but it's a universal size. So speaking of length, the one I purchased off of Amazon is 30 millimeters long, and that was very important. As well, the hook design, I also purchased it based on the hook design because it had a very long armature, so I knew that I would have, room to play around with, to customize it, which I figured I would have to do. So you can see on this image, you can see the scarring around the edge of the I don't know what to call it, the barrel, or the edge of the sleeve. You see where the white arrow kind of comes around from 9 o'clock up to about 11 o'clock, and then there's a dot at 12 o'clock. And if you look right below that dot, you'll see that edge is all kind of beaten up. And the reason that's beaten up is because I was trying to... I knew the new lock wouldn't fit, but I wanted to see how far it was off. So I was trying to, get it to fit as much as it would, just so I could see how much extra material I would have to remove for it to fit in fully. And, as expected, I would have needed to remove most of the material that made up that sleeve. So that wasn't going to work. Could not use their sleeve. Boo-hoo. That sucks. So here's the actual lock. And like I said, most of these pictures are brand new. Even though I've had these locks now for like 2.5 years or whatever. And this project's just been on the back burner because I couldn't wrap my brain around it at the time. A lot of things have changed in the past couple of years. My experience with 3D modeling has increased, specifically with Fusion 360 by Autodesk, which lets me use my 3D printer, which is also something I didn't have. Well, maybe I did have it 2.5 years ago. I might have had it, but I was so new to it that I was using other people's designs. Like, I'd go online, find a design, and go, oh, that's kind of cool, and then I would print that. I wasn't making my own designs at that time. Whereas now, I print out, I design up my own GoPro armatures. I design up my own, basically everything. I created a golf club for my VR helmet, my Oculus helmet, or my Oculus, what do you call it, thing. So you know, I've printed out the Master Sword and all that stuff. So I've gotten better at 3D printing, and I've gotten better at designing from scratch in Fusion 360. So at this point, I was kind of like, you know what, I could fabricate this. I had even done a threaded device once. I did a threaded funnel, which would thread into the oil receiving hole of a RAV4, Toyota RAV4, because just at work we they switched oil on us. They brought in 016, and we had 020 and 520. I think was the other one had. We had 520 and 020, or 530 and 020, something like that on our taps, which hang from the roof. Our oil cables. So when they came in with the new vehicle, not to get too sidetracked here with the story, but when they came in with the newer RAVs and some Corollas and Camrys that had 016, we were all using bottles. We had to do oil changes with the bottles, and that was a pain in the ass to hold the funnel and pour one bottle because your one hand is tied up holding. So I said, you know what? I'm going to see what I can do with my 3D printer. And I printed a funnel that had a thread on the bottom so I could, thread it into the engine and pour 2 bottles at once into the funnel. Because I had 2 hands free now, so I could just pour 2 bottles into the funnel. And it worked great. And that was my first time doing a thread in Fusion 360 and a design from scratch to boot. I designed it completely from scratch. So when I saw this thing had a thread, when I saw this key lock had a thread, I was like, you know what? I could create, or replace, I should say, the OEM sleeve. I'm gonna keep calling it a sleeve. It's basically what slides into the saddlebag and houses the lock. So I'm going to call it a sleeve. So I could replace the OEM sleeve with a new sleeve that I print. It would be better secured because I could put a thread on the inside of it to hold the lock, because the lock's got a thread built into it. So I could screw the thread, or I could screw the lock all the way into this sleeve, so it has 0 chance of falling out. I put some thread locker on it, and screw it in, and it would be there forever. And if something ever happened to the lock, I pop it out and print another one, and I could just replace it that way. So I was kind of like, there's no loss to this. This is a win-win. So what I had to do, my first step was going, okay, I need to find out how big of a hole I can make, because that's step 1. Step 1 was finding out how big this thing had to be. So I measured the thread maximums, which is the widest part of the threads, and I came up with 17.4 millimeters. Then I measured the thread itself and found out it's a 1.25 thread. So it's an ISO 1.25, but it's a 17.4, and I know this now, but I didn't know this when I started this project. So when I started this project, I had in my head that this was a straight M17 1.25 thread. So that's going to come back to haunt me during this story. But moving right along. So the first thing I had to do was figure out how big of a hole I could have, or what the size of my sleeve would have to be, the outer diameter. Before I could work on the inner diameter, I had to work on the outer diameter. So what I did was I picked up a stepper bit, I should say. And it's a 7/8 stepper bit. A 7/8, for those who don't know, is that would be American measuring. Oh my god. Here in the civilized world, we use millimeters. But anyways, so 7/8 is roughly, actually here in Canada we use both. We back and forth all the time. We'll use millimeters 1 second and inches the next. But at any rate, so 7/8 is roughly 22 and a quarter, roughly 22 and a quarter millimeters. Somewhere in there. I think it's a tiny bit less, but it's not less enough that it actually matters. It's like 0.001 or something like that. It doesn't make a difference. So anyway, so I was looking at roughly 22.25, somewhere around there for 7/8 hole. Now, interestingly enough, the hole that was in the saddlebag was already 7/8. However, the sides of the hole were flat. They weren't rounded. So you had a round top and a round bottom that were 7/8, but the sides were flat. So they were not 7/8 on the sides. So I just took the bit and I just ran it through there to get rid of the sides. You can see how the sides were kind of chewed up a little bit there, but the top and the bottom are pretty much, untouched. They're nice and smooth. So I reamed out the hole, made the hole a true 7/8, and then I can start designing. So at this point, I hopped into Fusion 360, did up some basic designs, and here they are. So what you see is on the right side, that's the sleeve on the right side. I made it kind of a mushroom shape, for a lack of a better explanation. The tube on the bottom of it is the same size as the hole I drilled, 7/8. The tube on the round section at the top is wider by about I want to say 5 to 10 millimeters, something like that, and that is so the plug will rest against the surface of the box. So that's kind of like a stopping point. So I can slide the sleeve in, and then the sleeve will hit the box and stop. It won't go. It won't keep going in. Now you can see I put a flat section on the top of it. I curved the edges, but I put a flat section on the top of it. And the reason I did that was because the barrel lock has a little bit of a ridge on it too. So I kind of matched that up. I wanted to make it kind of a smoother transition, not kind of sticking out and sharp edges here and there. So I wanted a nice smooth transition there. And of course you can see the thread on the inside that the barrel lock is going to thread into. So that was that section. Now the other section, the one that looks like a giant nut without a thread on the inside, I was actually going to thread it to begin with. I was gonna the bottom part of the mushroom and the inside of that nut were originally going to be threaded. And then I threw that design out because I was like, if I thread those and the threads don't work or don't print proper, that's just another thing that could go wrong. So I was like, you know what? I have Gorilla Glue, and I'm using PLA plastic to print this. And Gorilla Glue, and one thing that I have found out through a lot of gluing is that PLA plastic and Gorilla Glue are amazing together. Like, the Gorilla Glue will literally weld the PLA plastic together. There's no getting that apart without just absolutely destroying it, because it has a bond that is that strong, and it's like literally a 5-second bond. It's crazy. You have to be really fast when you're gluing the pieces together, because as soon as they sit for like 5 seconds, as soon as there's no movement for like 5 seconds, they just freeze right into place wherever they are at. So I figured I'd keep the surfaces smooth, but I would use the glue. I would glue it in, and I didn't see a problem with that. I still don't see a problem with that. So this was the design. This is what I printed. The first time I printed, though, I used these settings. I actually, you know what? Fusion didn't actually have settings for a M17 by 1.25. Didn't have it. It has a thread capability, so it can apply threads to things automatically. But in its catalog of threads, it didn't have a 17 by 1.25, and especially not one that has built-in variances. So I hopped into Excel. This is going to sound crazy. I was having an extremely ADHD hyper-focused moment, or I should say hyper-focused afternoon. I hopped into Excel, put in the calculations for ISO threads. I actually built all the ISO threads that I could think of. So I went with I had a 1 thread, I had a 1.25, I had a 1.5, and I think I added a 2 as well. No, I added a 2, but I removed it. So I just had I just went with 1. I went with 1.25 and 1.5 because those are the most common. I went with those 3. So I put in the formula for those, and then I proceeded to enter the information for every thread or every bolt and nut from. This is going to sound insane. Every bolt and nut from, I think it was M5 up to M30. I know I stopped at M30 because I was like, oh, I could go up to M60. No. Just stop. So I created every thread, those 3 threads, from M5 to M30 as a custom profile. Well, I should say I did it in Excel, so I got all the thread outputs, and then I put all that into Fusion 360 as custom thread profiles. So that's why it says that's why when you look at thread, it says Jodian ISO external. And then for the 17 mils, for the M17 by 125s, I went even one step further, and I added in offsets of 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, and alternatively, negative 0.1, negative 0.2, negative 0.3, negative 0.4. Because if you're on an interior, if you're on an interior like a nut, you have to use negative. If you're on an exterior like a bolt, you have to use positive in order to get your offset proper, or your variance proper, I should say. So what you would print if I was doing a nut and a bolt, I would print minus 20 on the nut and then plus 20 on the bolt, and that would give me an overall of 40. Or 0.4 I should say, which, might make a loose thread, but depending on the thickness of your filament, it could actually be a snug thread. So that's why I had to build in the variance. And since this was a one-off project, I only did it for the 17. Only did it for the one that I needed. So anyway, or so I thought at the time. So I had my M17 by 1.25. I was totally confident this is exactly what I needed. And then I printed it. And it came out beautifully. You can see this is looking at the bottom of the mushroom. The top part of the mushroom is actually in my fingers. You can see the edge that I left there. It's kind of the 3D print there is kind of rough because it needed to have supports. So you can see that's a little bit rough there. But that surface there would be getting glue, and then it would be glued in. Or that was the intention. That flat plate there, as well as a little bit of the barrel, would get some glue, and then I would slide it into the saddlebag. But anyway, so you can see the threads came out not too bad, not too bad. They're a little rough. I think this picture was actually taken after I tried to screw in the barrel lock once. So they look a little rougher than they did when they were printed. But I came to a quick conclusion that the barrel lock was binding very badly, and it would not screw in. And the reason it wouldn't screw in is because I completely forgot how, which is going to sound funny because like I just said, I just calculated out a whole pile of thread patterns, but I completely forgot that an M17 is 17 millimeters at its widest point. That's the tip of the threads, or the crest of the thread, not the base of the thread, which is the barrel itself. So when I was doing this print, or when I was putting in my threads, I was fairly confident that I was using an M17 because the first number was 17. It didn't matter about the 0.4. When I measured it with my digital micrometer, it came up as 17.4. So I was like, it's an M17 because it had a 1.25 thread, and away we go. But that's not how life works. So, in actuality, what I have is, or I should say what the barrel lock actually is an M17.4 by 1.25. And I didn't have a calculation for that. So, basically, I had to come up with a calculation for that, which was not easy, because the math didn't quite work out. It did, but it looked weird, because I wasn't used to looking at it like that. I wasn't used to looking at figures like off figures, like decimal points in the M17 or whatever. I wasn't used to having a decimal point there. I was used to it being 17, M17, M18, M19, M5, M6, I wasn't used to being a M17.4. So, so when I was doing the calculations, all the numbers looked weird. But, I trusted the math. I said, okay, I'm just going to put these numbers in and see what happens. This is with the with after I tried to screw the barrel in a couple more times, and decisively it just didn't want to go. You can see it's just destroying it just destroyed the plastic basically. But I did do the fit into the saddlebag, and it fit perfect. So the threads were wrong, but the fit was perfect. I should say the threads were right. The hole size is wrong. The dimensions of the hole were wrong. But the fit in the actual saddlebag was perfect. It slid in nice and snug. There was no movement. There was no bouncing around, anything like that. It was beautiful. It slid in perfect and just sat there. Didn't fall out. Nothing. I didn't need to. I could hold it upside down. It wouldn't fall out. So it had a really nice snug fit, which is what I was going for. Anyway, so after the catastrophe of having the wrong threads, I went back and I did some recalculations. Like I said, all the numbers look stupid to me, but I went with them anyways because, like I said, trust the process. trust the numbers, trust the math. It's a formula, so formula's not going to be wrong. Well, I shouldn't say that, but anyway, formulas can be wrong, but you just got to trust the numbers. So I went back and I created a profile for an M17 by 125 with a crest of 17.4 and a minor of 17. I figured the minor was 17 because I couldn't see the threads being more than 0.4 deep. So I figured the minor had to be somewhere around 17. I didn't think it would be any less than 17, and I didn't really want to go start playing around with like 17.1, 0.2. So I just said, okay, we'll go 17.4 on the crest, and our minor will be 17. And like I said, this was a one-off. This is a one-off project. I am never going to need this thread again for any other design, because this is just a weird design. And like I said, it's a one-off. It's not something that I'll repeat in the future, at least not to my knowledge. But anyway, and if I do, I have this one measurement for the barrel lock. That I had to just reorder the barrel lock, the same barrel lock, just reorder it, have it show up, print out something else with the same friggin' thread. But anyways, moving along, the most important thing here was the crest. The crest had to be 17.4, and the minor, I went with 17 just to be on the safe side. So then I came back and I printed it again, and hey, we're going to get our first video here. So I printed it again, and here is the result of that. You can see here, I'm going to show off, I'll show the barrel here, just so you can see the threads on the barrel. They could be about 3 to 4 millimeters, or 0.3 to 0.4, and then the threads of the little ring that I printed. I got smart now and just started printing little test rings instead of printing the full barrel. And as you can see, there's not that much wiggle room there. It's it's a nice spin on, nice spin off, very nice fit. And then I put on the original nut, which came with it, and look at the movement in the original nut. There is so much more movement than the original nut than there is in my design. So that tells me that this is good. So I printed out the full sleeve, and voila. So I now had a sleeve. I now had the barrel lock that would screw into the sleeve, and I was actually printing with I didn't have black. I still don't have black. Every time I've bought black thread or black filament for my printer, it has been really crap quality. Even if I buy it from the same company that I buy, all my other, like the filament that I printed this out of. Even if I buy from this company, I don't know, there's something about black filament that it just prints nasty. I cannot get it to print well. I don't know if it's because it's black and it's retaining the heat or what, but yeah, just will not print nice. So what you see here is, like I said, the barrel lock sleeved in or screwed into the sleeve, and the sleeve put into the saddlebag. And the saddlebag, of course, on the inside, will have the latch. So you can see that here. I put the latch on. You can see it's not secured yet. I didn't glue anything yet. This is just a loose fit trial. So I screwed the support arm on, or the hook arm on, the hook plate. I put it on, and then my next step was to try to figure out, because I knew this wasn't going to work just like this. I knew it wouldn't work like this, but I had to figure out how to make it work. So what I did was I had some some paint handy. I just had some acrylic paint handy here because I tried painting once and it didn't go well. I'm not that kind of an artist. I cannot hand paint. I cannot hand draw or hand paint. I have to do everything in CAD. But anyway, so I had some acrylic paint here, and so what I did was I put a dab, or put a couple of dabs, I should say, on the receiving hook. So you can see that here. You can see the couple of dabs I put on. I put on a green dab and a red dab, so I could not only tell if it was hitting and where it was hitting, but I could also tell what part of the catch it was trying to grab, or what part of this bar it was trying to grab. If it was trying to grab the red, I knew it was on target. If it was trying to grab the green, I knew it was a little off. So I did that test, and just so you can see how the barrel lock moves, I'll throw a video in here just so you can see how it moves. So this is just with me holding the lid open a tiny bit and turning the barrel lock, and you can see how it swings up and how it's going to catch. And then I close the lid. I did that movement again, and you can see here in this picture, boom, we have a little green dab on the edge of the hook plate, which tells me that's where the catch is hitting. So once I know that, then I can start thinking about fabricating a new catch, a new slot for the catch. I should also mention that I looked on the other side. And you can see here I've highlighted in purple, or I put a dot in purple where the impact happened. So you can see that it's a little far forward. It's definitely too far forward. It's almost on the edge of the hook. But that didn't bother me at all because the two screws that I talked about earlier that are holding that hook on, I could put washers under those to move that hook out a little bit further. And it only has to go out like one washer, as you can tell, because it's really, really close. It was really close to catching there. It was just a little bit too far forward. So at this point, I was just sitting going, this is going to work. This is going to work. Because up until this point, I didn't know if it would or not. All of this was just, I was taking it one step at a time. I was like, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And the whole time I was expecting, oh, I can't go any further. Like this is where I have to stop because I can't go any further. Or it's not possible to go any further. But every single step I was making here was telling me that I could do it. So I made the barrel that the new lock would screw into, and now I've tested that the hook for the barrel lock I purchased, the hook plate, actually impacts on the catch hook. So I was like, at this point, I was like, this is not only is this possible, this is going to happen. I just have to take my time and do proper fabrication, because if I screw up these metal pieces, I don't have replacements for those. So at this point, it was kind of like, okay, I can do this. It can be done, but I have to be very careful now because I only have one shot. Well, I shouldn't say I only have one shot. Well, I did only have one shot, because if I screwed up bad, like if I cut the wrong spot, it's done-no. It's done-no. I can't replace the plate, or I can't replace the hook plate. I don't have spares. So now became the point of fabrication. So I started out by taking a general look at the at the uh, at the hook that I would need to modify. You can see the little green dab of paint there on the bottom edge. You can see that little green dab of paint. So I knew that's where I had to place my cut, or my hook. I had to replicate a hook there. I didn't at this point know what kind of hook I would need or what shape the hook would need. I didn't think the hook that was already on there, I didn't think that shape would actually be proper for what I was trying to do, because it's kind of a weak hook, especially when you're trying to grab onto something and hold it, like put downward pressure on it. So I basically just took this photo for general measurements, and what you can see from this photo is you can see that the overall length of the lock, or the overall length of this clasp, or whatever you want to call it, the lock plate, the hook plate, is roughly about 40 and a half, or 45 millimeters, roughly. I get a more accurate measurement a little later, in a couple minutes here, but just generally looking at it, this was just generally looking at it, I could tell it was about 45 millimeters long, and I could tell, the green dot was roughly at the halfway mark, and I could tell that the shape of it is definitely not rectangular. It's actually wider on the end that has the circle is wider than the end that has the hook. So I could tell there was a taper there. So this picture gave me basically a starting place, as to where I could go from here. Then I basically took this photo. Well, not this photo, but I took a photo, brought it into Photoshop, and then I just started playing around. And I came up with a few, possible designs. I just basically started drawing lines. So here's the first one. And I knew I was going to cut the top off. You can see that the red line is just cut that off. And the hook design on this one, I went with the straight hook. And the reason why I went with a straight hook was because I wasn't quite sold on it not being functional. Excuse me. So what I did was, when I did this drawing, I then printed it out and cut out the shape, and then tried to see how it would swing over like a pencil. I just had a little pencil here, and I stood it up, and then I tried to see how it would swing over the pencil, which in my mind wasn't really showing me anything, but it was allowing me to visualize how the latch would work. Like, was there a down force? Was there an up force? If you tugged on it, would it come loose? Would it be able to self unlock? Anything like that. Would it have downward pressure to keep it from vibrating? There was a lot going through my head when I was thinking about these processes. So this was the first one. This was the second one. And the second one, you can see it kind of has a little bit of a taper up towards on the top cut. Not the very top cut. That top section, it comes off in all of them. But in the actual channel cut there, you can see I tapered it up a little bit. And then I started playing around with this one, and I was like, okay, so this one, when it closes, because the slot is tapered, because it's wider where it enters than where it sits, what's going to happen is it's going to have downward pressure. It's going to pull the lid down and hold the lid down. But then I looked at it further, and I was like, yeah, but there's nothing holding the lid from going back up. because all it's got to do is slide back up that slope, and it comes off the lock. And we're not talking about a deep lock here. We're talking, you know, it's only grabbing it by, you know, a few millimeters. So it's really not something you could just say, okay, well, this we're gonna put this slope in and it'll never be able to slide out because it's too far for it to slide out. In this case, it's not. It could slide out. So I was like, so I don't think this is gonna work. So then I went with option 3, or I looked at option 3, and I was like, really aggressive downslope, because now I'm thinking, oh geez, I don't want it to be able to just somebody grab it and lift it off. So then I thought, okay, ridiculously aggressive downslope. But when I was playing with this one, I realized that what's going to happen with this one is as it closes, it's actually going to open the lid. So I was kind of like, that's not going to work either. There's no, I lose all my, I gain more security because nobody's going to lift out of that. But I lose the downward pressure. So then for option 4, I tried to get the best of both worlds. I tried to get the downward pressure with an upward kind of, you know, where it would sit when it was fully closed. And this one here I thought was a really good candidate. And I was going to go with this. But you'll see in a minute how my thought process changed. So anyway, moving on. Before I could make any of these cuts, I had to make measurements because I needed to know where, you know, what shape is this and that and something else. And I decided at this point, it was at this point right here where I decided, you know, instead of just doing cutouts of paper, which is what I was doing at this point, instead of just doing cutouts of paper, why don't I got my 3D printer right here. Why don't I model this up and print out, you know, test cuts. So instead of just drawing this out, printing out the page, and then, you know, pretending to, you know, oh, this is, you know, going to go there. No, why don't I actually print out something I can attach to the lock and see if it actually locks and how it locks? So in order to make that happen, I had to do some measurements. And so this was my first set of measurements. You can see the green dab. It's still there. I got a green arrow pointing to it. This is important because that green dab actually goes away. It falls off. I don't know when it fell off during my fabrication or whatever, but I am so glad that I took all these pictures so I could reference where the hell that green dab was when I went into fabrication. So anyway, you can see here the bottom is indeed wider than the top. The bottom is 15. I don't know why that number is not green. I screwed up when I made this, but anyway. So the bottom width there is 15, top width is 12, and then somewhere around the middle there where the green paint was roughly 13.5. It's 47 millimeters tall, which I figured around 45. So 47, not that much difference. At least not when it comes to, you know, a guess. And then the star shape at the bottom, I went point to point, is 11. All of these in millimeters. And then I went and did a second series of measurements. So right here, I was you can see by the red here, I was contemplating where to cut it. I figured, you know, before I wanted to cut it at the bottom of that notch, and then I was like, you know what, maybe it'd be easier to cut it at the neck, right at the bottom of the neck there, because it's, you know, it's the narrowest part of the thing. So I was playing around with that. But anyway, the measurements that are important here is the 8 from side to side, the 7 from the bottom up to the center of the star,
and the 40 from the top down to the center of the star. Because I needed to know where the center of that star was, and the fact that I measured 40 on the top and I measured 7 on the bottom, I didn't just say the bottom was 7, so the top has to be 40. I actually measured them. So I was like, the bottom, I know the whole thing is 47, so I measured the bottom, that came out to be 7. I measured the top, that came out to be 40. 47 total. I knew I was on target. And then, of course, I did the teal measurement there. I kind of needed to know where that little lip started. So that's what that measurement is. That approximately 20 millimeters from that star point to that little corner. And it did help me. It did help me in the CAD designing. Now, one thing I realized as I was taking all these measurements was that star shape at the bottom, completely unnecessary. Because if you look here, where that plate actually sits is not a star, it's a square. The star is for fine-tuning when you're doing a cabinet. So you can set it to like a 45-degree angle instead of a straight 90 or whatever. Depending on, because you're screwing in the lock, right? So maybe the lock's not perfectly straight up and down. Maybe the lock's a little off to the angle, so that you can, you put your hook to match, or you hook wherever your receiving hook is. That's where you gotta end. That's where you gotta hook to. So I didn't need that customization because I was going 90 degrees. I was going straight sideways to straight up. So I was like, okay, so I don't have to incorporate a star into my design. All I have to incorporate is a square. And I knew where that square had to be. I knew what the size of that square was, 8 by 8, which works out to be roughly 11 corner to corner. So that was a confirmation right there too. And then I started fabricating. I took all my measurements. I went to Fusion 360. And I started fabricating. And by the way, the base plate, or the hook plate, is roughly 2 millimeters thick. So I had that measurement as well. So what I did was made up a couple of designs. I started with the original hook, and like I said, I only put the square on the bottom. I didn't want the star, so I just went with the square, and I made the original hook. And then I copied the original hook, moved it a little bit to the right, cut the top off of it, which was my plan, and then I paused. I went online and I looked for hook locks. And I looked for hook locks, specifically hook locks that would give you some downward pressure. And I only found one design. Only one. Online. I have no doubt there are more than one design. But, same as I couldn't find the Kawasaki design online, the other designs I can't find online either. There's probably hundreds of them, but they're just not online for you to see. So, the one that I saw online kind of did this weird, at the top entry point, it kind of came down and curved in fairly sharply, like a little round edge, and then it went up and curved back around on itself and came down. And I personally I thought this would lose pressure, but the way that I was reading the comments, it actually, you get a little bit thrown off because you have to take the rotation factor. It's not going straight onto, it's not like going straight sideways onto the grab arm. It's rotating onto the grab arm. So because of that rotation, your shape is going to be kind of weird. It's gonna almost be angular a little bit. And in order to hold the bar where it's supposed to be held, you have to have that hook, that little hook back. So I did the first design, basically trying to replicate what I saw online. I couldn't because the hook online was actually longer. It actually came out further to the right, So it did more of a hook. But I did what I could. I traced the design as well as I could. Or I should say recreated it. I didn't trace anything. I recreated it. And then, just to be on the safe side, because I knew I was going to be using a Dremel to cut this out, so the one on the far right is basically the one that's in the middle, but I decided to flatten edges. Instead of making it, curvy and swoop and whatever, I decided to make flat edges because that would be easier to cut. So that third one is with flatter edges, but it's roughly the same shape, roughly. And then I started printing. And here you can see this is the middle design. This is the one that had the swoop. And you can see the square hole, and you can see that swoop, that little hook at the top, that little stick out hook at the top, and then swooping kind of in, curving up and then curving back down again, I should say. So this was my first printout, and it wasn't bad. I don't believe it latched. So I printed out my second design. And this video here is the second design, which it's actually grabbed a little better. You can see here, testing it a couple of times. You can see it looks like it wants to go. It looks like it wants to go, but it's not going. And I was kind of confused by that. When I played back the video and watched it, because I can't see what's going on inside the box, so I put my phone in the box and recorded what was going on in the box. So here is the test with the hook one. Here's the test with the round hook one. And you can see that it doesn't, it grabs here, but it doesn't seem to have the downward pressure. There's no downward pressure to it. So I had to, well, I also noticed during these tests that the barrel itself was kind of starting to wiggle. When I was trying to lock and unlock, I would notice I would have to hold force on it because it would want to wiggle. And I was like, no, this has to be secure, or I'm not going to get an accurate lock test. So I printed out the nut, the threadless nut. Printed it out, and I glued it on. And sorry for these next few videos. You're gonna probably or photos. You're probably gonna see a glob of glue that I didn't realize was there, or I didn't notice was there until I started making this video. So yeah, if it looks like there's a crusty booger hanging, it's just glue. It's glue remnants. So in this next video here, what you can see is my next test, which is with it secured. It's all glued in now, so it's not going to move around. And this is the test with the more squared one, not the round one, the more squared one. And you can see it looks like it wants to grab, but it's not grabbing. But it looks like it wants to grab. So I did some I kind of filed the edge a little bit, and then try it again. And you can see it still doesn't really want to grab, and then it kind of grabs. And it kind of just, it pops on. So you can see it has a little bit of trouble grabbing the first time, and then it grabs. Now, the reason I figured for that was because I didn't have the washers in yet. So I put the washers in, and unfortunately I don't have a video of that test because it actually worked. I didn't have to see what was going on because it was just like, click, locked. I was like, oh, great. So now I had my shape. I had my shape, which actually ended up being the rougher shape. It wasn't the smooth one. It wasn't the one with the smooth curves. It was the rough one. So then I transferred that over onto the metal. So I transferred that design over onto the metal. And at this point, I was fairly rushed. There was a motorcycle ride for a charity event that was happening today, which is when I did this. So there was a charity ride happening the day that I did this, and as you can tell, the saddlebags are not on my bike. So, and time was running out. It was wheels up, or it was kickstands up at 1:15, and I think at this point right here, or not this point. No, this was late last night when I marked it. But I didn't start cutting it until this morning because I didn't have a Dremel. I didn't have my Dremel. It was in storage. I had to go get my Dremel this morning. And then I realized that my cutoff wheels didn't exist. I had the little container for the cutoff wheels, but it was empty. So I was like, okay, now I got to go shopping for cutoff wheels. So I went shopping for cutoff wheels, and I picked up a couple other things for work. I can't walk into a tool store because every time I walk into a tool store, I end up spending $100 because it's like, oh yeah, I needed this for work. Oh yeah, I needed this for work. Life as a mechanic, you know. So, yeah, after I dropped a bunch of money on work supplies that I probably didn't actually need. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I did need them, but stuff that could have waited. I got back home, and it was roughly 12 o'clock, or it might have been 11. It might have been 11:45, but still, I had like an hour to cut, fabricate, test, get a shower, you know, and get a shave and get out and actually drive to the location or ride my bike to the location of the charity event. So I was under a time crunch. So I cut the I very rapidly cut out the notch, and then I was like, okay, let's just try it with the notch and see what happens. And here's the video of that test because it obviously didn't grab. That's why I'm doing this video because it didn't grab. So I was like, okay, what is going on with this thing? And you can't really see it. You can't really see it in that video unless you look really, really close. So I took another angle of it, and this is the other angle, and watch closely what happens, specifically with the top part. It hits the screw. You can see the washers that I installed. It hits the screw and pops it out further. So at this point, when I saw that in the video, I realized that it's not the hook that's the problem. It's the fact that I didn't cut the top off. The top is actually forcing the hook out further because it's coming into contact with the screws. So when it forces the top out, the hook doesn't go where it's normally going to go. So I cut the top off, and at that point in time, I had to leave. I had no more time. So I just put the lock on. I went and went and tried it. It worked, and I went on the ride. And I literally got there as they were starting the motorbikes up to go on the ride. So I was like, I just made it. So after about a 2.5 hour ride for charity, I got back home and did this video of the actual the lock working. So you can see the lid closed and turn the key, kabam! And I am tugging as hard as you can see the flexing of the case as I tug on the lid, and it does not move at all. Success! So, that basically is the story of the fabrication of this of the new key lock. And I mean, I would be willing to make these files available if needed. I don't know if anybody else is going to be in this position, but I just thought it was an interesting little fabrication video I could put together for you guys. I wish I would have got actual video of me doing the fabrication now, like doing the actual work, figuring everything out, and calculations and whatnot. I wish I would have recorded all that, but I think it would have been interesting. But anyway, this is the best I can do with what I got. I can't go back and rewind time. So I hope you enjoyed, and maybe it'll help somebody else someday. Who knows? But anyway, take care. This is Jody and signing off. I'll see you next time. So long and sayonara.